It began with nothing more than the way she said his name, quietly, as though testing its sound in the empty air between them. The rain had been tapping against the kitchen window for an hour, soft but constant, and the clock above the counter had stopped ticking some time earlier. The whole house felt paused, caught between moments that neither of them wanted to end. He should have left 10 minutes ago. Maybe 20. But when she turned from the sink, wiping her hands on a towel, and said softly, "Stay a little longer," it didn't sound like a suggestion. It sounded like something she hadn't meant to say out loud. He nodded, pretending to glance toward the rain, pretending it was about the weather. But it wasn't. It was about the space between them, how it suddenly felt smaller, how her perfume seemed to settle in the air, warm and faintly floral, like something that had always been there but he was only now noticing. She leaned against the counter, her arms folded loosely. She wasn't trying to look composed, but she always did, that quiet confidence of someone who had already lived through enough to know how to hide what she felt. Yet tonight, her eyes lingered a second too long. "You don't have to," she added, almost under her breath. "I know." He smiled, soft, uncertain. "I don't mind." A pause followed, not awkward but thick. The kind that makes every small movement louder than it should be. The clink of her cup. The shift of his chair. The faint rustle of her sleeve as she brushed a strand of hair away. She walked past him to place her mug in the sink. He caught the faint warmth of her as she passed, her shoulder nearly brushing his arm. For a moment, he forgot how to breathe. He wasn't sure if she noticed, but her hand hesitated midair before setting the cup down. "You always notice small things," she said after a moment, not turning around. "Maybe I just look too long," he replied. That made her laugh, a quiet sound that felt like a ripple through the silence. She turned then, her eyes catching the dim light. "You shouldn't say things like that," she murmured. "Why not?" "Because you don't mean them." He wanted to say that he did. That he meant every word, maybe too much. But he didn't. Instead, he reached for the mug beside him, pretending to need something to do with his hands. Her gaze followed the small motion, and when he set it down, her fingers brushed his, light, accidental, deliberate. Neither of them moved for a second. The touch was nothing, but it wasn't nothing. The rain grew heavier outside, wind moving the branches against the window. The sound filled the silence like a heartbeat. She exhaled, slow. "You should probably go," he finished. She didn't answer. Instead, she stepped closer, just enough for him to see the faint shadow beneath her collarbone, the line of her jaw tightening as though she was holding back a thought. Her voice was low when it came. "You're too young to understand what this looks like." He smiled, barely. "Maybe. But I know how it feels." The words hung there, almost reckless. She looked at him, really looked, and he saw something flicker in her expression, hesitation, longing, regret, all tangled together. For a heartbeat, it felt like the air itself leaned toward them. Then, a sound from the hallway. A door clicking open. Footsteps. She stepped back quickly, her composure returning like a mask. "It's late," she said, her tone level again, but her eyes gave her away. He nodded, not moving. The rain didn't stop. Neither did his heartbeat. And as the footsteps grew closer, she whispered, just loud enough, "Tomorrow, maybe." He didn't mean to come by again so soon. He told himself it was about the book she'd lent him, a pretext, flimsy and obvious. But when she opened the door, the look in her eyes said she knew. "Forgot how it ends already?" she teased lightly, though her voice was softer than her words. "I thought I'd return it before I got too attached." Her lips curved faintly. "You say that like you're talking about something else." Maybe he was. She stepped aside to let him in, and he noticed again how her home always felt half lived in, the kind of quiet that comes from long evenings spent alone. The same cup still sat by the window. The same faint scent of cinnamon and rain lingered in the air. She'd once mentioned her husband in passing, used to live here too, but never elaborated. He didn't ask. Still, the absence was everywhere, in the way she never filled the second mug, in how her laughter often stopped too soon. "You shouldn't come by so often," she said after a while, settling into the chair across from him. He smiled. "I don't think I do." "You don't think, or you don't care?" Her words weren't harsh, they were careful, like she was testing both of them. He looked down at his hands. "Maybe both." A small silence. The sound of the rain again, like déjà vu. She shifted slightly, leaning forward to pour tea, her sleeve brushing against his wrist. He felt the warmth of her skin through the fabric, light, fleeting, enough to undo his practiced calm. He didn't move. She didn't either. Their eyes met, just for a moment, and it was as if the world narrowed to that single inch between them. Then she looked away, quickly. "People talk," she said, her tone steady but too even. "You know that? About us?" "There is no us," she replied, though her fingers trembled as she set the teapot down. He leaned back, forcing a small laugh that sounded too hollow. "Right." She hesitated, then reached to steady the teapot, her hand accidentally covering his. It stayed there, just long enough for both of them to feel it. When she pulled back, the air felt charged, almost electric. "You're good at making people forget themselves," he murmured. "I'm not trying to." "I know," he said quietly. "That's the problem." Her breath caught, barely audible, and when she finally met his gaze, there was no pretense left. Just that unspoken understanding they both pretended not to see. A clock somewhere ticked, slow and deliberate. The rain softened. She stood, as if to end it, but didn't move away. Her hand rested on the back of his chair. The warmth of it was enough to make him forget every reason he shouldn't be there. "Next time," she said, her voice low, almost breaking. "Don't knock first." He looked up at her, uncertain if she meant it, but she was already walking away. And for the first time, he didn't know whether to hope or to leave before he stayed too long. It wasn't supposed to happen again. That's what they'd both told themselves, quietly, separately, like a promise neither planned to keep. But he came by anyway. Late afternoon light poured through the window, catching the edge of her hair as she turned, surprised. Or maybe not surprised at all. "You shouldn't be here," she said, though she didn't close the door. "I know," he replied. "But I didn't want to be anywhere else." Her silence was the kind that said too much. She stepped aside, and he walked in, the same scent of rain and cinnamon, the same careful neatness that couldn't hide the loneliness beneath. This time, it was quiet in a different way. Not the safety of silence, but its danger. She moved about the kitchen, reaching for something on the top shelf. He stood behind her before he realized it, close enough to feel the faint warmth of her body, close enough to see the tremor in her hand when she reached too far. "Let me," he said, his voice low. She froze for a second, then nodded. When he reached past her, his arm brushed against her shoulder, a small, ordinary touch that didn't feel ordinary at all. Either of them stepped back. "You make this difficult," she whispered. "I don't mean to." "I know," she said softly. "That's what makes it worse." The quiet stretched thin between them, humming with things neither dared to name. Then, the sound of a phone vibrating. Loud. Abrupt. She flinched, stepping away too fast. The phone lay on the counter, screen lighting up with a name he didn't know. She turned it face down, her breath uneven. "Someone checking in?" he asked gently. She nodded, but her eyes didn't meet his. "Just someone who thinks I should be somewhere else right now." He almost smiled, but didn't. "Maybe they're right." "Maybe," she murmured, though she didn't move away again. He could see her struggling, between reason and whatever this was between them. He felt it too. The weight of it pressed in from all sides, making the air itself feel too heavy to breathe. She turned then, meeting his gaze. "You shouldn't look at me like that." "Like what?" "Like you mean it." He wanted to say he did. Every glance, every breath, every half-second he'd spent trying not to think about her meant something. But he didn't say it. He only stepped closer, until the distance between them was no longer safe. Her hand lifted, maybe to stop him, maybe to touch him, and stopped halfway, trembling. Someone could see, she said, but her voice was barely a whisper now. He nodded, though he didn't move. Then maybe we should move. She gave a small, shaky laugh, the kind that ends too soon. And then, for one suspended heartbeat, they just stood there, his breath against her cheek, her eyes flicking to his lips, both of them caught in the gravity of almost. A door clicked somewhere down the hall. They jumped apart like children caught doing something wrong. Her voice came quick, rehearsed. It's just the neighbor. He drops the mail sometimes. He exhaled, half relieved, half regretful. Right. But even as she stepped away, the air between them didn't cool. It shimmered, fragile, alive. And before she turned, she said it again, quietly, like a secret she didn't want to mean. Next time, maybe don't stop. He didn't knock this time. The rain had stopped, but the air still held its heaviness, that damp quiet that follows storms, when everything feels newly fragile. She looked up as he stepped inside, surprise flickering across her face, followed by something else. You took me seriously, she said softly. You said not to knock. Her breath caught on a half-laugh. I didn't think you'd remember. I remembered everything, he said, too quickly, too honestly. For a moment neither spoke. The late light from the window drew long lines across the floor, and dust floated like static in the air between them. She stood by the piano, one hand resting on its edge, the other brushing a strand of hair from her neck. The movement was casual, but his gaze followed it, helpless. He wanted to look away. He didn't. You shouldn't be here, she whispered again, but this time it didn't sound like a warning. Then tell me to go. She opened her mouth, but no words came. He stepped closer, slow enough for her to stop him if she wanted to. She didn't. When he reached her, his hand hovered unsure, before brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. It was the kind of touch that says everything words can't. Her eyes closed for a moment, just one, a long, quiet surrender of breath. Don't, she said, but her voice broke halfway through the word. Why not? He asked softly. Because I don't trust what happens after. He smiled, not mocking, not bold, just sad. I already don't trust what's happening now. She turned away, walking toward the window, pretending to fix the curtain. Her reflection in the glass trembled with light. You think this means something? I don't know what it means, he said, stepping closer again. But it feels real. She spun around suddenly, too close, too fast. He caught her wrist instinctively, and for a moment they froze. Her pulse beat quick beneath his fingers. It can't, she said, her voice low, breathless. You don't understand what people would. I don't care what people would. He cut in. The silence that followed was dangerous, the kind that changes things. He didn't let go, and she didn't pull away. Their hands stayed joined, like neither knew who was holding on to whom anymore. Say something, he murmured. Her eyes met his, wide, unguarded. You make me feel like I'm still allowed to want something. The confession hit harder than he expected. He stepped in closer, her breath met his, her heartbeat steady against his chest. Then want it, he whispered. The room seemed to shrink, the sound of rain returning faintly outside, the ticking of a forgotten clock. She tilted her head, eyes falling to his lips, then a knock at the door split the air like glass breaking. They both froze. Her voice came first, quiet but certain. Don't move. And as she turned toward the sound, he knew, whatever happened next, the line between them had already been crossed. The knock still echoed in his chest long after the sound had faded. She'd stepped into the hallway, her voice low, steady, too calm to be natural. He caught only fragments. No, not now. I'm busy, please. The door shut softly, but the silence that followed was sharp enough to cut through the air. When she came back, she didn't meet his eyes. Who was it? He asked. No one, she said a little too quickly. Then, after a pause, a friend. From before. Before what? He wanted to ask. Before him? Before this? but the words felt too heavy to say. She moved past him to the counter, her shoulder brushing his as she reached for a glass. The touch lingered, but her hands shook slightly as she poured the water. The sound of it, soft and uneven, filled the space where words should have been. "I heard something," he said quietly. Her head turned slowly. "What do you mean?" "When you were on the phone. You said please. Like you were asking them not to come in." She hesitated, the glass trembling just enough for the water to ripple. Then, setting it down, she whispered, "You weren't supposed to hear that. So it was about me." Her breath caught, a confession in silence. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You told someone about us?" Her eyes flashed, then softened. "Not exactly. But someone knows you've been here." "They asked questions?" "Who?" "A friend of my husband's," she said, the word landing like a forgotten truth. "He still stops by sometimes. Checks in." He stared at her, the room suddenly smaller. "You never told me that." "I didn't think it mattered," she said, then quieter. "I didn't think it would get this far." The honesty of it, the quiet, helpless way she said "this far," hit him harder than anger could. He wanted to say something cruel, something that would make her push him away before he fell any deeper. But when she looked up, eyes uncertain and glassy, all he could do was reach out. Her fingers met his halfway, not holding, not pulling back. Just trembling in the middle, as if afraid that touching would make it real. "This isn't fair," he said softly. "I know." "Then why?" "Because you look at me like I'm still alive," she whispered. He exhaled, every reason dissolving between them. "And what happens now?" She didn't answer. Instead, she stepped closer, close enough that her breath warmed the air between them. Close enough that her next words barely existed. "Then maybe," she murmured, "we stop pretending we don't already know where this ends." Her hand brushed his, once, twice, before she turned away, walking toward the window as if the distance might save them. It didn't. He followed. And when she looked back, the decision was already in her eyes, quiet, terrified, and unstoppable. Night fell without either of them noticing. The light stayed off, and the room took on the kind of dimness that makes everything feel closer than it should. She stood by the window, arms folded, her reflection a ghost against the glass. He lingered in the doorway, unsure if he was waiting for her to speak, or for her to stop him. "You shouldn't have followed me," she said finally, without turning. "You told me not to pretend," he replied. Her breath fogged the glass. "I didn't think you'd take that as permission." "I didn't," he said softly. "I took it as a reason." That made her look at him, really look, and something in her eyes shifted. Not anger, not surprise. Just a weary recognition of someone who had run out of ways to lie to herself. She took a slow step forward. "You don't understand what this costs." He shook his head. "Then tell me." Her lips parted, but no sound came. Instead, she reached out, a small, trembling gesture, and touched his collar, barely brushing it straight. Her hand lingered there, uncertain, before sliding upward to his neck. The air thickened, breath and heartbeat and silence tangled into one rhythm. "I tried to stop this," she said, her voice low, uneven. "I know. You make it hard to remember why." He smiled faintly. "Then maybe stop trying." That broke something in her, or freed it. She stepped closer, until their bodies nearly touched, until he could feel the warmth of her breath against his skin. Every second stretched, sharp and fragile. "Say it," he whispered. She blinked slowly, as if weighing the cost. "You want me to say what we both already know?" "Yes." Her voice dropped even lower. "Then here it is. I wanted this long before I allowed myself to see it." The admission left her shaking. He lifted a hand, hesitant, and traced the line of her jaw with the back of his fingers. She didn't pull away. Her eyes closed, and for a heartbeat, the space between them disappeared. But then, she stopped. Her hand found his chest, not to pull him closer, but to hold him still. "If we do this," she whispered, "we don't go back." I don't want to go back, he said. Her gaze softened, sorrow and want intertwined. You think that now. But someday, you'll look at me and wish you hadn't. He leaned closer, his voice almost a breath. Then let me be wrong. Silence. 1 heartbeat. 2. Her hand slid from his chest to his shoulder, a small, surrendering motion. Then she pressed her forehead to his, eyes closed, and whispered, You already are. The words were either yes nor no, but they felt like both. For the first time, there was no hiding. No distance. Only truth, raw, trembling, and unbearably close. They didn't kiss. They didn't have to. Everything that needed to be said was already in the air between them, and both of them finally understood what it meant. Morning crept in quietly, pale light spilling across the floorboards, soft enough not to break the stillness they'd built overnight. She sat by the window again, knees drawn close, her robe falling loose at the shoulder. He watched her from across the room, the way she held the mug in both hands as if it anchored her. Neither of them had slept much, but it didn't matter. The storm had passed. The silence between them no longer felt like tension, just peace that had been waiting a long time to arrive. You're leaving soon? She said, not as a question. He nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. For a while. Not forever. Her eyes drifted toward him, searching his face for something she couldn't name. You make it sound easy. It isn't, he said. But maybe it doesn't have to be wrong either. She exhaled, slow and steady. For the first time, he saw her without the armor, no guilt, no careful distance. Just her. A woman who'd carried too much and finally decided to set it down. You think we'll be okay? She asked softly. He crossed the room, stopping beside her chair. I think we already are. For a moment, she didn't look at him. Then she set the mug down and reached for his hand. Her fingers were cool, small, deliberate, like a final answer to a question they'd both been asking for too long. I used to think wanting something like this made me selfish, she said, voice trembling slightly. But maybe it just means I'm still human. He smiled, tightening his grip gently. Then I'm selfish too. The corner of her mouth lifted, and she leaned her forehead against his shoulder, a quiet, natural motion, like an exhale that had taken months to come. His arms slid around her waist, drawing her close. Neither spoke. There was no need to. The world outside was waking, a car passing in the street, a bird calling from the wires, the faint smell of rain still lingering. But inside it was just them, two people who had finally stopped pretending to be anything other than what they were in this moment, seen, accepted, enough. She tilted her head slightly, her voice brushing against his shirt. You'll come back? He looked down at her, smiling softly. Only if you tell me to stay a little longer. She laughed, that low, quiet laugh he'd chased since the first night. Then don't go too far. He nodded. I won't. And for a long moment they simply stayed there, his hand resting over hers, her head against his chest, the light shifting slowly through the curtains. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't certain. But it was real. That was enough. When she finally looked up, their eyes met, calm, steady, understanding. No fear left, no hiding. Just the kind of closeness that felt like an answer. The kind that stays. Sparkles, did you enjoy the story? Thought Balloon, what kind of stories would you like to hear next?